USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
This week's Game of the Week is Union and Northeastern, actually for a pair of games, Friday and Saturday. I'm at Trefzger with Jim Connelly, and Jim will be joined in a moment by Northeastern head coach Jim Madigan. I expect this to be two terrific games.
You know, obviously Union played well last weekend against Omaha. They got into the top 20 in the poll, and that's a big step for them. Northeastern, they had a tough game last Friday down at Sacred Heart, but then kind of got things rolling in the third period, and that carried right into Saturday. They get 2 wins. I like the way both these teams have played. It's early in the season, but this could be a real duel of two hard-hitting, grinding teams going into an early season weekend series. And now to talk about USCHO's Game of the Week, one of the coaches involved, that's Northeastern's Jim Madigan. Jim, good start to your season last week. Not the easiest road series to go and play, to have to start out on the road against Sacred Heart, but you found a way to get 2 wins, and that's probably a pretty good positive out of the game.
Yeah, Jim, it was a good weekend series for us. And this year we decided not to play an exhibition game leading to the Sacred Heart weekend. So it was our first 2 games. And, we hadn't been tested with our special teams, with our system. And, with new players each year, there's a learning period, as we know. And to go into Sacred Heart and be that first game for many of our kids, first test of college hockey, I like the way our group responded, led by our seniors and our upperclassmen, and those aren't easy games as you indicated. The Atlantic Hockey League has some real good teams, as we saw last week with they had 2 wins over hockey schools last week. So we felt good with our kids, and how they played and how they executed, all the while knowing that that gave us a barometer. We know now the areas we've got to continue focusing in on. It was a first step, and we got to get better in reaching greater heights as we got high expectations for ourselves.
Let's talk a little bit about this season. Obviously, you graduated some really good players. You lost a Hobie Baker winner from your roster from last year. But a lot of what I've heard and read on social media over the summer, you still have a very positive approach, because you know that what comes back is still pretty solid. And obviously, to have a guy like Caden Primo in the nets, he was phenomenal for your team last year as a rookie. There's a lot of positive thought from you. You don't really see this as a rebuilding year.
I don't see it as a rebuilding year, and I guess in your early statement, I guess that's what I'm missing. I don't see number 8 on our roster out there on the ice. At the forward position, anyways. I think he's in Vancouver, a guy named Davies. I'm missing him when we're practicing. But saying that, it's always nice when you have a quality goaltender and a first-team all goaltender, and you've got that foundation in that position. And then, you look to our defense, and we've got a first-team All-American who's returning as a junior. So he was a first-team All-American as a sophomore, and Ryan Shea's been a steady, reliable and high productive player for us for 3 now, beginning his junior year. And Eric Williams, our captain, is a senior. So I like what we have on the back end in terms of a foundation, and we're integrating 2 or 3 young new players in there. And then our forwards, where everyone's going to look at the drop off when you lose a Gadet, a Secura, and a Stevens, that represented 75 plus goals. We're not replacing 75 plus goals, but we're not trying to replace 75 goals. Where we and this indicative this week, where the first game against Sacred Heart, we won 5-2, and we had a lot of chances. If this might have been last year's team, it might have been 5-0 after the second period. Well, it wasn't. But I liked our mentality. We're going to grind it out a little bit more, and we got 10 goals from 9 different players over the weekend. That didn't happen all last year once, guys. So our scoring is going to be spread out. And the team knows that. So it's more of a wear-down mentality. We're the fast striking team, which we were last year and maybe for the last 2 or 3 years. But I like the group, and they come ready to play, and they pursue pucks, and they work hard. And collectively as a group, we're getting some contributions from the back end. There's, for me, teams evolve. They change every year, and they evolve during the course of the new year. And our team's just starting that evolution process, and and building a culture for this year, for the 2018-19 season. But, everyone's excited about it. And, we firmly believe that we can be challenging, come March.
Jim, one player in particular, I just want to get your thoughts on. He last year kind of came out of the gates quick, and that's Zach Solo. I think he had 3 goals in his first weekend last year. He finished the season with only 5, but when you have a power line like that first line last year, it's easy for other players to take back seats. Do you feel like he is a player that is that goal scorer that many people thought he could be? Is he somebody that can take that step forward for you this year?
Absolutely, and there's 2 or 3 other forwards returning that I think could take a step forward for us, or take a step ahead for us and be that productive player. Zach's first and foremost probably more of a playmaker distributor. He'll get his goals, but he's his history points to being a producer from a distributor's perspective. Saying that, he's got a little bit of, Dylan Secure his first year. Dylan Secure wouldn't shoot the puck his first year, and he had 5 goals. The second year, he had 10 goals. And, then the third and fourth year, he led the league in shots. Zach's got to get a little bit more, selfish in those scoring areas and not look to distribute and dish off. But he came back in tremendous shape physically. He knows that he's going to be counted on to be one of our top players offensively, and he's been really good in practice in preseason, and he played well this weekend. And he had a big goal for us in the first night, and had 2 or 3 points, I think. And I'm not looking at the stats, but over the weekend, and played really well. And he wants to assume more of the offensive responsibility, and that's a good thing.
Another guy, you kind of alluded to him earlier, but that's Jeremy Davies on the blue line. A great player last season, easily one of the best players in the country on the blue line. I know that coaches, love to talk about, defense first, offense from defense, all of those good things. But you almost need to lean on him as a bit of a leader. Does he have that personality, do you think, to be that leader?
Oh, he's got that personality and more. I mean, he's that guy that when he's on the ice, he's got swagger, guys. He's got confidence. He wants to be the playmaker. He wants to, as much as you can from the back end, he wants the puck to go through him. And he's up in the play. We're encouraging him to be up in the play. On all the while not being a risky player and being a defensive, being a defenseman and making sure that you're taking care of your own end. But no, he wants to take on that added responsibility. And he did last year, the second half of the year, when Garrett Cockerell was no longer with the program. He stepped up. He was having a great year, but then he just emerged even greater last year. And so we fully expect that to happen this year. He's also a young man who's really got great on-ice awareness and keen to our team to know that, hey, we expect him to provide some offense for us. He knows, particularly early in the year, that, hey, we're still going to score our goals and get our chances, but hey, as we go through that transition and all 4 lines being able to contribute, he can also contribute from the back end. And so he's aware of that. And, he scored a big goal the other night for us, and he's, involved in the offense, 5-on-5 and certainly on the power play.
We're speaking with Jim Madigan, head coach at Northeastern. They host Union College this weekend, and that's the USCHO game of the week. Non-conference games loom very important, not just for teams, but for leagues in general. Last year, Hockey East was just a bit above 500 and sits at 500 right now. How much do you look at, when you're putting together schedule, the caliber of the teams and what teams you want to get in there? And then secondly, how much do you look at the overall performance of Hockey East against the rest of the country?
First and foremost, when we look at our schedule, we're looking to play the greatest quality opponents that we can play, so we can challenge our team each and every weekend. And we play 24 league games, and we have 2 games. It's called the Beanpot Guys. You've probably heard of it. That's built into our schedule. So we're only looking every year for 8 conference games, and we're trying to get a blend of games with the different leagues, the Atlantic League, the ECAC, because those 2 leagues are close geographically for us, but also a feel for the NCHC, the Big Ten. We're coming off of a 4-year agreement with Minnesota, Boston College, and us. We partnered the 3 schools now. BC, us, and St. Cloud have partnered together So we're looking at those opportunities also as we build our schedule. And so, that goes into the thought process, and we're out, three more years with our schedule. It's a 21, 22 with our schedule. And then you're also looking from a league perspective, absolutely, because the pairwise is so important. Getting as many teams as you can into the NCAA tournament. It depends on all schools within our league to do well against our opponents in those non-conference games. And so we each have a burden of responsibility in those games. We each have a responsibility to trying to attract the best teams you can play on your schedule and then win those games. And that's at the forefront of everything we do. And certainly our commissioner, Joe Britagna, reminds us about it in a good way. And as coaches and programs, we know that. And we're all, I think, all schools within the league are trying to get a healthy balance of non-conference games. And, last weekend was an average weekend for us. And, if you go back prior to this year, we've been really, really strong versus our non-conference opponents. Last year, we had struggled, particularly against the Big Ten last year.
Well, Ed did mention it is the USCHO game of the week, Union against Northeastern, 2 games at Matthews Arena. Jimmy, what do you expect from this Union team? Obviously, they had a good start against Omaha last week with a win and a tie. What do you expect from Union?
Well, if you remember watching Ricky Bennett play, he was hard-nosed, big, strong, tough, and that's how his teams play. They're fast. They engage in battles. They seek a battle. They go to the net really hard. They're in your face. They want to punch you before you punch them back type of mentality. And they've got skill along with that. So they've got some skilled players who can make a difference on the power play. So we know we got our hands cut out for us, as well as had very good goaltending and playing very well in their defensive zone. So the challenges for us this weekend are immense there, and we're up for the challenge. We're looking forward to the challenge, but we know that this is a very good Union team who's battle tested, been to the NCAA tournament, and their team reflects their coach in so many ways. And so we've had 2 good days of practice this week, and we expect a battle Friday night at Matthews Arena.
Well, it is the USCHO game of the week. We will be covering it end to end Friday through Saturday, and we hope that it will be as good a hockey as we predict. I believe it will. Jim Madigan, thanks so much for your time. Enjoy the weekend. Good luck this weekend.
Appreciate guys having me on.
That's Northeastern head coach Jim Madigan. His number 12 Huskies have a pair of games against the Union Dutchmen, who come in ranked at number 20 at Matthews Arena this weekend. Well, Jim, let's look at our lightning round, some of the games among top 20 teams coming up over the next few days. Let's start with number 15, Wisconsin, who came into the poll for the first time in quite a while after their sweep of Boston College last weekend. They traveled to New York State's North Country to Cheal Arena to take on Clarkson in a pair of games. Yeah,
I don't think a lot of people had expectations for Wisconsin, and if they didn't, maybe shame on them. I know they were picked 6th out of the 7 teams in the Big Ten, but this one, you look at that roster, and I started to look at some of the names scoring goals last week. This is still a roster with a lot of talent, a good freshman class, and obviously they did some great damage against Boston College. They played 2 different types of games, one where they never really trailed, the other game where they jumped out to a 4-0 lead, allowed Boston College to catch up, but then found a way to finish. So, it's one of those teams that I feel like they're playing well. On the other hand, Clarkson maybe didn't have the best weekend, didn't have the weekend they're looking for, but this is a team that we know Casey Jones still has the expectations for his club. They want to be a top 20 team this year. They want to be an NCAA tournament team. And these are the series that can help you. At home, you got the home ice advantage. You've got that crowd going at Cheal. That's a great arena to play in when it's loud. That should be a really fun series. Even though it's not 2 nationally ranked teams, I think that's a really fun series to watch.
And you talk atmosphere, Clarkson may have the best band of any college hockey team in the U.S.
Yeah, I'd put them up against most. They really do.
Speaking of a team with high expectations, Greg Carvel's UMass Minutemen travel to Ohio State. The Buckeyes ranked number 1. They swept at Arizona State in a toughly fought series last weekend, but it's a chance to see what both teams are made of.
Yeah, really interesting. I talked to Greg Carvel earlier this week, and one of the things he mention was the series that they played against Ohio State last year. There were two pretty close, low-scoring games, and Greg walked off the ice and saw his athletic director, Ryan Bamford, almost immediately and said, those are the big boys. We just played against the big boys. But he also said that series gave his team a little bit of confidence to know that they played a really good team and to know that they didn't get blown out of the building, that they hung with them. He likes this test early season, and you're going on the road to number one Ohio State. That this is the series you kind of, as he said, you want to get that shot at the big boys right away, and he's going to get it. But Ohio State, I got to watch their Saturday game against Arizona State last week. I really liked their patience. They weren't trying to press to score goals. They just were taking the opportunities that came to them, playing some pretty good defense. When there was some offense for Arizona State, the power play especially, goaltender was playing well. So I think that's a really great series to watch. And if UMass pulled out one of those games as an upset, I wouldn't be shocked.
Jim, earlier in the week on our USCHO Spotlight podcast, we talked to Minnesota State head coach Mike Hastings. His number 7 Mavericks go to the unfriendly road arena of Engelstad to take on number 16 North Dakota. Now, this is a North Dakota team that went 0-1-1 last weekend at Bemidji and only got 2 goals out of the 2 games.
And I think they're ready to go home for 2 and be there for both games as opposed to having to split and play anything on the road. I think they like the confines of the Ralph, and they get some great support there. But you're also looking at a Minnesota State team that really did handle Boston University well last weekend. And despite the fact that they were kind of close games, I still think that they learned a lot about themselves, and they're going to go in there with a lot of confidence. And it's a tough environment. Everybody knows that, but I don't think, knowing Mike Hastings, knowing his team, I don't think there's going to be a lot of intimidation for them walking into the Ralph. And North Dakota is going to have to show up. And he knows that he's going to get a big effort from, handed to him from an opponent like North Dakota that's hungry. They didn't score much last weekend, 2 goals in 2 games, not getting a win out of the entire weekend. That's a tough thing for North Dakota sometimes to swallow. I think that, one of those situations where you might have a hungry team, but you might have a darn good team on the other side as well.
100 miles back and forth between Kalamazoo and Ann Arbor on I-94, Michigan and Western Michigan with a home-and-home weekend.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Michigan's hungry. The series against Vermont, it was a single game against Vermont, didn't sit well with them, and then they ended up playing an exhibition against the under-18 team last week, lost that as well. They just want to feel the confidence of winning a game, exhibition or otherwise. They just want to make sure they can win. And Western Michigan, that's a good opponent. Andy Murray has his team going right now, and they seem to be playing good hockey. I think that's a good home series. You're looking at a Western team that was able to sweep Ferris last week and kind of convincingly on Saturday night with a 5-0 win, and they had everything rolling. So I'll tell you, Michigan, I'm sure their fans are going to be antsy. They want this win. It's almost what we're talking about a minute ago with North Dakota. But, you've got a confident team coming in, and you really want that win at home if you're Michigan. So that home game for Michigan will be one that, on Friday night that they're going to be a little bit hungry for. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
It was a good weekend last weekend for the Black Bears, and Maine heads now to Minnesota Duluth for a pair of games. Duluth coming in at number 3 in this week's poll.
Yeah, there's an air of confidence in Maine right now, in Maine hockey. I'm not going to call them, a Sean Walsh-like Maine team that was dominant, but those fans up there want to see success. And obviously last weekend, a couple of good wins, that makes you feel good. But Minnesota Duluth, they got those 2 wins that I think we had talked on this podcast last weekend. They really needed after starting out against Minnesota and not winning a game. They get a loss and a tie in that series. They get 2 wins against a good Michigan Tech team, and that gives a little bit more confidence. Now you're back at home. You're going to bring in an opponent like Maine that can be plucky. I mean, they've got some offensive ability. They've got a good goaltender back there in net. And you just want to see that consistency. Both Red Gendron and Scott Sandlin both want to see their teams perform now consecutive weekends, and they'll both have the opportunity when Maine heads out to Minnesota Duluth.
A single game on Friday wraps up our lightning round here on the Game of the Week podcast. Number 18 Boston College hasn't won a non-conference game since November of 2016, and they travel for a single tilt at Quinnipiac.
Yeah, BC needs a win. They know that. That series at Wisconsin probably doesn't sit well, but Quinnipiac's playing well. They went up to Vermont last weekend and won. And, that's a game that, knowing that Vermont was coming off of a great upset of Michigan on the road, Quinnipiac had to come back in that game. They trailed in the third period, found a way to win it. I like the way that Quinnipiac's playing. I know there's not that, typical Quinnipiac expectation of finishing first or second in the Ivy League or the ECAC, the Ivy League, however you want to say it. There's not that typical expectation of finishing first in the ECAC, but I still think that, they have high expectations for themselves. No Rand Pecknall team goes into a season without a lot of expectations. So Boston College is going to have a challenge, and they really want to get some of these non-conference wins and soon and fast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to point fingers only at Boston College, but Hockey East had a poor non-conference record, relatively speaking, last year, and right now we're at 500 after the first couple of weekends of the season.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We just talked to Jim Madigan about that. That's something that I think Hockey East and the coaches know they've got to start correcting their non-conference play. They need those wins, or else come March, it's going to be a tough road to hoe in the NCAA tournament.
Well, that'll do it for this week's edition of the USCHO Game of the Week podcast. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.